Okay, dudes and dudettes, you are listening to Gallifrey Public Radio. I'm Noel Clark. Don't you ever touch that dial.
This is Gallifrey Public Radio, a weekly podcast dedicated to positive enjoyment of Doctor Who. We travel through classic and new episodes, explore the extended universe, and play a few games from time to time. We do discuss news, content that has been officially released, and the occasional interesting rumor, but we'll warn you before anything considered spoilers comes up. Welcome to episode 374 of Gallifrey Public Radio, where this time loop ought to last long enough to get us to series 13. I'm Kier.
And I'm Jay, and this week, we're back in the 1970s to wrap up Season 16 and the Key to Time arc during the Armageddon Factor. No, the credits aren't mistaken, that's both Mary Tamm and Lala Ward in the cast. But it's not what you may think. So, Haley's off preparing the grid for faster cellular connections in this madcap world. So, joining us for the conversation is half the powers behind Who and Company, Drew Meyer. Drew, welcome to a spot somewhere between Atreus and Zeos.
I'm in that third planet, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We were going to call it Planet of Evil, but we think that was already taken.
Sure.
Well, we always start these classic looks back with a little bit of a quick high level take on your opinions of the story writ large, but also just your degree of familiarity with it as well, because that differs based on who we've got sitting in the chairs with us. So I will start with you, Drew, and just say your familiarity level with this season closer, 6 parts as it is, and your sort of general high altitude opinions of the story.
Well, this is the second time I've watched Armageddon Factor, and this is one of the first, the Key to Time series was one of the first DVD series released. I guess it was on actually September 11th was released on DVD. I got it many years after that and watched it all the way through during my first pilgrimage, and then it didn't really impress me. Very few of the episodes did. So I think when I go back to the Key to Time, I think of all the parts, I think I only watched like 3 of the episodes, 3 of the stories rather.
Right.
This one was just kind of felt a little long, and yeah. So when you suggested, it's like, okay, well, and I actually sat down and watched all 6 episodes last night and enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. I think it's a bit patchy, and we can talk about that more. But on the whole, I was not as bored or disappointed as I thought I was going to be.
I guess we'll take that as a positive. Jay, what was your familiarity level and general opinion of the Armageddon Factor?
This was my first time with this one, actually.
Okay.
I've never seen this one before, so I was hoping for something monumental, because, this is the final part of the Key to Time series, and it was really wrapping something special up, and I was not prepared for what we got. It just kind of left me wanting. Well, no, I won't even say that. By the end of it, I felt sated. I just wondered why it took so long to get there.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay. Well, I'll admit this is one. In the process of trying to make sure that I made some sense of my childhood exposure to Tom Baker, which was completely anachronistic and completely out of sequence and at times really, really patchy at best based on what PBS wanted to do to me that week. Mm-hmm. When I had the opportunity to get a hold of completed sets, whether they were VHS or DVD, that was what I went back to. So this is probably about in recollection, probably my 3rd full pass through this season. And I have to say, it grows on me every time. I don't know if that curve will continue in subsequent rewatches, years down the road. But this story in particular gives me some of the warm feels that some of the other stories of the season don't. Maybe it's because of foreshadowing or having a little bit of previous knowledge of what's to follow and sort of looking at things kind of wistfully. Or maybe it's just because there are certain notes in this that hit me as a viewer of enjoying the balance of the suspense or the darkness and the comedy. And maybe that's because this is where we finally start bringing Douglas Adams on full bore as our story editor. So maybe that has some sort of an influence over it. I'm not really sure. But yeah, I would say that this one is probably well into the pro column on my list.
All right.
But I don't know. What do you say we dig a little deeper into this?
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do.
Absolute power over every particle in the universe. Everything that has ever existed or ever will exist. As from this moment. Are you listening to me, Romana?
Yes, of course I'm listening.
If you're not listening, I can make you listen. Because I can do anything. As from this moment, there's no such thing as free will in the entire universe. There's only my will, because I possess the key to time.
Doctor, are you all right?
Well, of course I'm all right, but suppose I wasn't all right. This thing makes me feel in such a way. I'd be very worried if I felt like that about somebody else feeling like this about that. Do you understand?
Yes.
What do you understand?
That the sooner we hand this over to the White Guardian, the better.
Drew, you had mentioned specifically when it came to being a 6-part story and feeling a little patchy at points. Is there any justification as far as you would see it as keeping it a 6-parter, or would you like to go through and do a little careful nip and tuck?
I mean, I think if they clearly had this time that they needed to fill, I don't think the story, for what it starts off with, needs to be a 6-parter. However, if I was going to nip and tuck, I would probably cut one episode from it. There's a lot of running around back and forth. I think there's probably a good episode or two, maybe even you could get. And then I would then tack on an episode or two where we find out after all of this, once the 6th piece to the Key of Time is collected, maybe giving almost an entire episode to the final conflict with the Black Guardian, I think would be really where I would want to see some work done. And I haven't read the novelization of it, so maybe they go into a little bit more detail about that. But the problem, and I think as we're just talking, this is the end of the first Doctor Who season-long arc, and it just kind of ends. And I think that's a real bummer, and I think I would have liked to have gotten something a little bit more grandiose. Maybe that's just the new Who influence on me, but yeah.
That's a fair assessment, though. I think we only have the capacity to be able to look at these things through our modern lens, right?
Yeah.
And we can go ahead and remind ourselves that, okay, well, to a certain degree, this was written for a different consuming audience, and they were accustomed to a different pace of storytelling or what have you. But we can only assess it the way that we see it, especially for those who are seeing it for the first time. But when it comes to things like the repetition, specifically the repetition, part of it is actually written into the script. How many times did we have to see, the ship on the monitor moving 3 seconds towards the screen, 4 seconds towards the screen, or K9 in all of his, what I can only describe as demo mode.
Right.
But as far as that last episode, and when you're saying that, when it comes to the reveal of the Black Guardian and getting that adversarial aspect thrown in sort of as you're walking out the door almost, if you were sitting in a theater, you'd be at the point where you're realizing, okay, we're in the denouement here. All right, where's my coat? Great. Do I have my car keys? I don't want to leave them on the seat when I get up. Did I pick up my popcorn bucket? And then they chuck this at you in the final minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know if this would be an entire additional episodes worth, or say you condensed everything else down to 5, that this would be the 6th episode, because I feel that might be, unless it was done as the entire 6th episode was not going to resolve anything. It was just going to throw everything into a tailspin, so that as a true season-ending cliffhanger, we'd realize, oh, okay, the camera just pulled back and the scope is much larger in this threat than we realized. Now we wait and see what's going to happen in the next installment. But I'm a little concerned, and maybe I'd have to do a little more research to see what the actual backstory was, that a lot of this, as a result of Mary's decision, was being sort of figured out on the fly. You're building the plane as you're flying it.
Sure. But can you imagine getting a full other episode where we could have had Mary Tamm and Lalla Ward both in the TARDIS a la Edge of Destruction, with the Doctor and the Black Guardian just appearing on view screens as they move through the TARDIS? Yeah, I'd be down for that.
That would be pretty cool, yeah. Now, Jay, when you look over the sort of the pacing and some of the decisions about where they drove the action forward and where they decided to slow it down, maybe for younger viewers, I'm always reminding ourselves this was a family show, or maybe it was just because they were sort of figuring out, what really clicked and what needed more time to sort of push through. Did you feel that there were any large swaths that could have been put out to pasture?
You mean when we're watching the countdown clock go from 10 seconds to 2 seconds, and I had enough time to run to the kitchen and grab myself a snack and come back, and it was still repeating the countdown?
Yeah, those kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah, there were chunks where it was just like, I understand that we're trying to, you don't have to show that many times for us to understand time is stretching out. There were a number of times where they just mentioned it, where Romana was like, oh, we're up to 6 seconds now or something like that. That's all you needed. Remind us of the fact that it's there. But I wanted to go back and actually time how much of it. But I mean, you've got like a solid 2 to 3 minutes of screen time that is just repeating the same stuff, so that you get the sense that it's stretching. Mm.
But then they deflate that by cutting to Shapp and Merrick, who are not frozen, and they're moving about freely, even though in the previous scene they said, oh, we've frozen the universe.
Yes.
So it's like, oh, yes, this is a loop. I get it. It's in a loop. It's a loop. Oh, nope. But apparently it's just the ship. So nothing else seems to be frozen, even though they have mentioned that specifically. So
it's let's be fair here. It's going to take a lot more than some rinky-dink jury-rigged time loop to stop the Shapp.
No, I know. I mean, the Shapp is all. At least, I mean, the first 3 to 4 parts of this is essentially the Shapp show.
I can't get enough of this guy. I mean, supporting cast across the board was pretty great, because where you needed your mustache twirlers, you had your mustache twirlers. Where you needed your dumb thugs, you had your dumb thugs. Where you needed your doe-eyed love interest, yeah, there you go. That's fine. Yeah. But Shapp is Shapp, man.
Yeah.
As much as fun as he was, by the end of it, I had to remind myself that this was all part of the same story, because it seems like the first 3 or even 4 episodes were all just like, let's get to a point where the Doctor has to find the key or whatever. And it just seems like it was tacked on just so that you're like, okay, well, we need to get to this point, so let's have 4 episodes worth of stuff getting us to this point so that we can tell the story that people are really interested in.
Right. Which is a lot of classic Who.
And specifically within this season. I mean, there were very few instances. I think there was maybe 1 out of the 6 parts where it was written, okay, here's the piece. You get it in the first episode, and now it's how do I get out of here with it? Mm-hmm. And that was just that one take. But everything else was a matter of it was concealed or it was out of reach. You knew where it was, but you couldn't quite access it. So they sort of went at it from a couple of different perspectives. I think the idea of sort of coding it into the princess's DNA, so to speak, or to make her a living embodiment of the key was kind of a clever take, because and then it comes down to that decision of the good of the one, the good of the many.
Right.
We always love that confrontation, right? Your trolley problem, always positive.
Right.
Right. That part of it I enjoyed. It felt like, we've talked about how with the 6-part stories, it's always a part of like, oh, well, now they're here, and now they've got kidnapped, and now the power switches, and it's always just the back and forth of the power, because you have to keep tension throughout the whole thing. And this time it felt like they tried to change it up, and the tension was, oh, it's actually the shadow behind everything, and everybody else is kind of inconsequential. And I'm like, okay, well, why didn't we just start with the shadow being the bad guy? Because now it just seems like the rest of it was pointless.
Yeah, a lot of classic Who 6-parters are like that, where it feels like once you get to episode 5, you're telling a completely different story. I mean, Talons of Wen-Chiang, very similar, where you've got a bunch of characters, and then they sort of have moved to the side where you get to the new threat. But if I'm going to have to spend 4 episodes with some secondary mustache twirlers, John Woodvine's The Marshal is so intense. And, speaking of Shapp, the pairing of the two, it almost feels like a Holmesian double act, right? Where, but it's rather than the the witty back and forth, you have maximum intensity, which he does so well. And then Shapp feels like he's just so bored of everything. It's so good. I was very entertained. And, I've got this running on in the background while I'm working on other projects, but almost every time Shapp came on, or actually either of those two came on, it got my attention. So I, applaud actually everybody. I even thought Merak was quite decent. On the whole, I think most of the cast has something to do and is fun.
The cast was stellar in this one. I enjoyed everyone. There was no one that I was just like, oh yeah, that the guy who said that one line, he was in this. I forgot that. Like, everybody was great. I enjoyed the cast itself immensely.
I think if there were anything that I would consider a bit of a weakness on this, is I actually got, and maybe it was because of the sheer amount of screen time, or maybe it was just the fact that it seemed to be a bit overdrawn, was K9. I got rather tired of the prolonged scenes and the unnecessary utilization. Okay, the Trojan horse bit was pretty good. I'll give you that one. But yeah, I would say if anything, those are the points where I would look and say, oh, do I need to top up my iced tea? Oh, did I flip the clothes in the dryer yet? Do I have to go take care of that? And so,
I will say that moment where K9, possessed by the shadow, calls the doctor, and the doctor catches on, and there's that moment where it seems so weird. I'm like, what? I couldn't remember. Is this a John Leeson episode? Because that didn't sound like John Leeson. Oh, right, because he actually did it in a completely different voice. So he's actually doing two K9 voices in this. I thought was quite cool. But on the whole, and I know it's sacrilege to say so, as I'm not overly impressed with K9 in a lot of the stories. The one-on-ones where the doctor's like leaning in to chat with K9 is cool. But once you put the dog on a flat surface and watch it slowly crawl across the screen, it doesn't really do much for me. I really hate to say that, because I want to like K9 more than what we're actually given. K9's one of those things that, for me, is better in kind of theory than in actual practice.
Or in small doses, so that it remains practical and not gimmick.
Yeah, right, absolutely.
Okay. What I would say is probably not something that I could ever tire of is listening to Drax dump on his time on Gallifrey and the Citadel. He has got to be one of the absolute gems of classic Who. You get these supporting characters like Jago and Lightfoot, and you get to your, you get your meddling monk, and just these larger than life characters that seem like they're so out of place, and they are just too good for their story. And Drax sits atop that heap with a dented crown.
I will say this about Drax. Were I using my magic wand and making this a 4-part story, I would have put Drax in by episode 2, so we had him throughout the entirety of the thing. But Drax definitely does make that separation between the first 4 parts and the last 2 parts very obvious, because he's such an energetic and dynamic personality, and he's so very different from the energy level that we've been kind of seen up to that point, that it is a little disconcerting, because in order to get Drax, we have to lose quite a few other people, and the fact that we don't have a Shapp and Drax double act is a bit of a bummer.
It's a crime. He should have Drax should have come to Shapp's rescue when he got shot down outside. That fall is beautiful. And I don't think it was intended. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe it's sort of fallen into myth on this as to whether or not that was really how it was supposed to be executed. But they had to sort of leave it as it was, and fall back. the absolute dead fall. I mean, that was a trust fall he was doing with no one behind him. It was fantastic. But when it comes to Drax, what I'd like to know, and if it hasn't been done, then one of our listeners, feel free to run with the idea. And if one of our listeners won't, then damn it, I will. I need to know whatever happens to Drax's TARDIS.
True.
Oh, good point. So we do know that he, in a week into the future, or a couple of hours into the future, discusses with the Marshal what they're doing next. Because unless he's using the Time Lord trick to be able to look at a timeline while standing still, which is certainly possible.
I don't think he made it to that year in his lessons.
Yeah. Oh, that's
think he
true,
dropped out a lot
right?
sooner.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with Drax because there's so much of the back in the days of the Academy between the Doctor and Romana, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they definitely talk about grades and the classes, and so this Drax is would feel a lot more out of place if it wasn't for the fact that we had kind of set that up. But I love the idea that he's essentially like a failed frat guy.
Well, and the Cockney accent just like completely sells it too.
Right, that he's been to Earth though.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, is he the only other Time Lord up until that point of time who's been to Earth outside of just there to harass the Doctor?
Right.
And loved it so much that he invested. He said he was there for 10 years or so, and picked up all the colloquialisms and accents, and it's just part of his natural persona at this point. He's been naturalized. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Mm-hmm.
I need more Drax. I'm pretty sure I need more Drax.
Yeah.
I had a question for you regarding maybe it's actually beneficial, the fact that Haley's not with us for this recording session, because this would spoil her for where she's going to be headed going into the next season. So looking in the rearview mirror, knowing the fact that this was Mary Tamm's final story, and that she made the decision during the filming of this particular set of episodes. She had been sort of considering leaving the program and made the decision finalized that she was going to go. I know the rumors were out there that, she was pregnant or whatever. No, she didn't like where the character was headed, or didn't like the fact that the character had not developed into the way that I guess it was originally pitched to her. She wanted to be more than just eye candy and an assistant, and absolutely had the capacity for it. And if you don't believe that, just watch the last 3 minutes of this entire story. But went out on her terms. Do you think that the fact that she made this midstream decision, or I should say mid-production decision, harms the way we head into the next season and our transition to Romana's regeneration, which seems, we'll get to it in a couple of weeks' time when we cover that story, but it's a little awkward. I just have to wonder whether that was a matter of necessity, or whether they just wanted to try something different now that they had another character who could regenerate.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with it, mainly because Doctor Who has such a history of really much worse ways of getting rid of their female characters. So it's not like she was sent off on a scientific mission and never came back, or she went. What did happen? I can't remember. How did Dodo get dismissed? Like the Doctor sent her out to do something, and then they just left without her. I mean, they just
ditched her.
Yeah, there's much worse ways to take an exit in Doctor Who, and I think, it's a bit of a bummer. But you had mentioned looking back, knowing what we know, and actually knowing what we know, I like it more. I didn't know that she was going to change the first time I watched it. I was not a history buff. I hadn't read anything about it. I was watching it with new eyes. And so I really remember that first time seeing the change that Mary Tamm, not that we see Mary Tamm, but the change we get for her coming out as different Romanas. I liked that. It was really fun because it was probably the next night after watching this one. So no, they could have done better. She certainly, an actress of her caliber, deserves better, but on the whole, for what the show had set up ahead of time, it could have been worse.
Jay, do you feel like you wanted something? Would you have expected some sort of a button or some sort of inclusion towards the close of this story that gave you some inclination that there was going to be a major change coming?
At least, you could have just simply given Romana a line at the end, like, just hinting that she was going to change. It's, the fact that we come back to it later and it's just like, that was the last I'm ever going to see of Mary Tamm on the show. That's okay. That's disappointing. Just allude that, like, hey, this is my final episode. The fact that you recognize it retroactively just feels like it robs something of this of the story.
She was willing to come back and shoot a regeneration sequence. She had made that clear in the DVD extra they had done back in the 90s, the Something About Mary. But I don't know. I wonder why that was never done. If it was given the opportunity and there was no conflict, it wasn't any sour grapes or anything.
Well, let me ask you this, because we don't get to see this often in Doctor Who. In Modern Who, there's that moment after regeneration where you've got the energy and it's not quite finished baking, and they can be a little bit more fluid, and they use it in all weird and creative ways. But do you like the fact that in the next story, Romana can just up and change as many times as she likes? I mean, it's not like she's regenerating because she died. She's regenerating because she made a conscious choice, and it's actually kind of a cool thing for. She's like, yeah, I'm just changing who I am. I can do that. It's not something we've seen the Doctor do, so it actually gives her this modicum of power that the Doctor doesn't have.
Well, I mean, if we're gonna apply the modern day Who to it to try and rationalize it, maybe that's something that all Time Lords can do, and it just takes the Doctor dying because it's not because it's a natural thing for them. Maybe the fact that the Time Lords have it tacked on as like genetic modification allows them a little bit more control over it.
Oh, are you saying, well, are we going like...
Yeah, I'm going absolutely current here.
Yeah, in full knowledge of post-timeless children.
Okay. Oh, I mean, yeah, I guess that's you could easily rewrite it with that knowledge. Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone was considering it that way, but I guess Doctor Who fans moving forward will be looking at this story, if they're looking at it for the first time, if they've already familiar with the new series, maybe they're going to see it through that lens. It's kind of a interesting way to think of it now, because there's so much more to kind of parse if you watch all of New Who and then go back to the classic series. That's going to require some thought.
Yeah. We had been discussing that a couple of weeks ago, right after Timeless Children aired. We said, every time we go back to watch classics now, we're going to be doing it with this, this slightly warped lens. But we weren't able to really assess whether that was going to be to the ill or to the good, because it could be something where you look at it and say, oh no, that doesn't fit. That absolutely can't work now. Or you can look at it and see it as some sort of a continuity challenge. And you look at it positively and say, "Oh, now I get a fun way to sort of figure out how this, how this square peg fits into this continuity round hole."
Well, if it's a matter of continuity and fitting your own version of the story into it, I mean, it's the same as if the way it was with the Morbius Doctors. You could choose to accept that was a thing, or you could choose to ignore it because it seemed like most everyone did. So now you're going to have a whole new set of things that don't fit into the story, and you can choose to. Deny it or accept it as it kind of comes to you. So I'm fine either way. I'm particularly easy, so maybe I'm the wrong person to ask.
No, it's absolutely valid, and we'll be sort of looking towards this in the weeks to come, because as we get into the next season, as we get into season 17, which is this is Baker and Ward when they are in full stride is an amazing thing to see.
Yeah.
But it's at this point where you start to get writers and story editors, Adams included, where they really start to enjoy weaving a bit of a tapestry with the continuity that has been laid before them, or the tools that they've been given to work with, and the desire to start becoming clever with that manipulation. So this is where it really starts to come into play. So we'll be able to watch that one pretty closely. The last kind of question I had for you about this particular story breakout was when it comes to the use of Lalla Ward as our princess. I have to wonder whether somewhere along the way, as soon as our BBC drama department executives and our executive producers and start to realize that they're losing one of their leads, that they start sort of considering their supporting cast as screen testing for potential utilization, because it seemed awfully convenient that you pick the needle up off the record with this story and Mary, and you put it right back down at the top of the next consecutive episode with your supporting character from the previous story. That list must have been awfully short for potential replacements.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I just was struck with how young she looked. She did not look like she was 27 years old during the filming of this.
No.
I mean, she really looked like a kid to the point where it's almost disturbing. But I could see that. She puts in a really good performance, especially in those last two, where she kind of takes the more serious role when she's possessed by the shadow. Mm-hmm. So I did enjoy that. But it's interesting too, because I'm trying to think, and tell me what you think, because I'm trying to remember my lore. Is Lalla Ward the first example of an actor who appeared in Doctor Who and then came back for a significant role on the program? Because I know we have repeat actors who show up in different stories. Mm-hmm. But is this the first one? Because, we get Colin Baker later on and Capaldi and
as a different role. Yes,
as
there
a
are times,
different
obviously,
role, but also significant. I mean, she's in all 6 episodes of this. You don't forget her in that story, and then she comes back as a major character. Have they done that before?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think this is the first time.
Yeah, I was only ever think of where you had a character, but they came back as that character once again. You would go back and read it. And maybe they had an opportunity on second iteration to be a little bit more, earn a little bit more screen time, be a little bit more integral part of the storyline.
Sure.
What have you. But as for a character flip like that, no, I don't remember that ever happening before.
I mean, Pat Gorman's in this, and Pat Gorman was what, like 80 different Doctor Who stories? I mean, like, no one's going to go, you can't be the pilot of that ship. You were that other guy in that other story. But this is a character who, like, we're very familiar with their face and who they are and their acting abilities.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, she was the ingenue. Everybody always remembers the ingenue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's, I know. I mean, it's almost a staple with New Who. I mean, you look at Freema Agyeman, you look at Peter Capaldi, you look at Karen Gillan.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens all the time where it's just like, oh, look, it's or most of the time people don't even recognize them, but or it takes somebody pointing it out after the fact for you to realize it. But I mean, this is one of those, especially with. There is no gap whatsoever. Like, we just, I mean, doesn't this story like kind of end with, with Lalla Ward popping back up as a human, and it's like that's the last image we see, and then the next one where like it just seems weird that it was that close together. That of course you're not going to be able to forget that.
Well, then either she really knocked the socks off the execs and earned her spot, kept herself at the top of the folio going into the casting decision. Or there was some sort of a conscious effort, maybe over the course of filming these 6 episodes, as the conversations with Tamm were sort of going around Television Center. They said, well, call it serendipity that we happen to have this other talent who's breaking forward right now, who looks like she can go, she can share screen time and actually hold on to a chunk of scenery that Tom Baker is not devouring. So because that's got to be a discerning factor. I mean, can you imagine having to do screen tests against him?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you wouldn't have to at that point in time because you had already been on screen with him so much. I mean, it's really weird. I don't think I've ever been. I think I've only been to a con with Lalla Ward twice, and I don't think the conversation is how did you get into Doctor Who ever came up. There was always something else someone was asking. But it would be interesting to hear, like, with that conversation just moving it forward. Yeah.
Well, I would imagine most times, I mean, she gets inundated with the questions about her relationship with Baker, and that's got to be exhausting at this point. But, all right, we'll have to keep that on our consideration list if we ever have the opportunity to sit across a microphone with her. Mm-hmm. All right, so last question for you, and this really has to do with not necessarily the continuity aspect, but the what was really going on here, and that had to do with our final moments and the assembly of the key. Baker giving that great wackadoo performance, eye rolling, hepped up on the jelly babies, just really going over the top with it, and then obviously the Black Guardian's reveal at the monitor. If the Black Guardian had been keeping his eyes and ears and thumb on the Doctor's progress throughout all of these previous adventures, where was the White Guardian through this that didn't pop up in the final moments?
Are the White Guardian and the Black Guardian one and the same?
Are they?
Are they?
I don't
like. Wouldn't it make so much more sense if they were the same side of 2 coins, or something along those lines?
Are you saying something like the Doctor and the Valyard? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's just I think both of them needed the Doctor to get the piece. Like the Good Guardian needs to get it so that the Black Guardian doesn't get it from collect it. And the Black Guardian needs the Doctor to get it so that he can get it easier. I in my head, I don't know. I always kind of felt like it was just they were the same character.
Okay.
I kind of wrapped it up with watching this and thinking, okay, it was the Black Guardian that sent him on the quest in the first place. I don't think we ever actually saw the White Guardian at all.
So the entire thing was a ruse.
Yeah, that's an even better and less complicated way of putting it.
I'd rather go with split personality disorder myself. That's fine with me.
I think if you're that powerful a being, though, I think now if we have to take modern Who and bring it back, aren't the two Guardians mentioned specifically in what's the one with the wet willy?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Were they both mentioned, or was it?
Well, the Guardians.
The Guardians.
Guardians,
yeah.
plural. No, and then I think Guardians. It's a plural title for a singular entity.
It's like the Jeffries. All of the Jeffries over there.
And their tubes.
All right. Well, again, more stuff that we can play with in extended content or story writing. Please, as we're all inside right now, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go write some stories. This feels like a particular span of time where the industry, unable to actually produce new content for us for obvious reasons, conditions, and circumstances, in a formal capacity, we cannot go out and film. We have shut down production on all of these shows, all of these films, all of these other projects. But we are clever. We are storytellers. We are characters and caricatures. So we're going to hand you, the entertainment-consuming public, little bits. There's just a swath of them this week that every single one is just adorable. There's even one that I didn't even put on the list here, but I'll knock it out first because it was something that was just handed to us this morning, as we all woke here, at least in North America. That was Jodie's little inclusion into the trapped indoors, everybody feeling very anxious, very nervous, very concerned about the state of the world and the state of everyone's health and well-being. Please tell me, I'm going on a bold assumption that both of you gentlemen have watched her little film clip from this morning.
I have, and I think it's my favorite moment of her Doctor Who so far.
I have not had the chance yet.
Okay, I am going to pause right now, and I will edit the recording so that Jay can go and watch this minute and 15 seconds. So, Jay, go point whatever device you want to at one of the BBC Doctor Who official channels.
Yeah, no, I saw it pop up on my Instagram. I just didn't actually get the chance to watch it.
Do that. I will clip this out so you can go watch it.
All right.
Oh, hi. This is an emergency transmission. If you're seeing this, the TARDIS must have detected an upsurge in psychological signals from somewhere in space and time. Basically, I think somebody somewhere might be a little bit worried. I'm actually just self-isolating, or as I like to call it, hiding from an army of Sontarans, but keep that to yourself. Now, here's what I do in any worrying situation. 1, remember, you will get through this, and things will be all right, even if they look uncertain, even if you're worried. Darkness never prevails. 2, tell jokes, even bad ones, especially bad ones. I'm brilliant at bad ones. 3, be kind. Even kinder than you were yesterday. And I know you were super kind yesterday. Look out for each other. You won't be the only one worried. Talking will help. Sharing will help. Look out for your friends, your neighbours, people you hardly know, and family. Because in the end, we're all family. 4, listen to science and listen to doctors. Right? They've got your back. 5, stay strong. Stay positive. You've got this. And I will see you very soon.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So she broke a lot of people this morning.
She really did.
Yeah.
Come to find out from Ray Holman, who was our costume designer for the last 2 seasons, that he had left her with a full costume intentionally so that when she needed to, she could go out and do things like children's hospital visits or whatever else that she felt she needed to be in character for. So she always has hanging somewhere in her home, the full gear and kit. So I think that's fantastic. That just makes the story even better.
That is the most Peter Capaldi thing I think that I've ever heard
Right.
about her.
But it's so funny. A lot of the reactions that I've been reading through all through the day as it rolled from time zone to time zone to time zone were a mix of people obviously just elated and thanking her for taking the time and the effort and the energy to put it together, and people who said that they weren't necessarily massive fans of the show, but knowing what that character's conveyance of that message is at this moment made it that much more valuable.
It makes me really, every once in a while, I'll go through this moment where I'm like, am I really a Doctor Who fan? Like, I just feel like there's so much negativity in the fandom sometimes. And then weeks like this will happen where the show's not even on the air, and I'm gathering with the fandom, in one form or another, and it just makes me so absolutely happy. Something like this just really brightened my day. But there's more things to brighten my day, so we can talk about those as well.
Yeah. Well, in keeping with our 13th Doctor, as we had seen happen during the previous the Day of the Doctor rewatch, right? We had this massive movement where everybody decided they were all at once. Let's all do something positive. Let's remind ourselves of some of the joy and happiness in the world, and we're all going to watch Day of the Doctor at the same time. And it became a big hashtag trend, and particularly on Twitter, everybody was making plans to do this. And Stephen Moffat decided that he was going to chime in on it, and that he was going to do some live tweeting. Even though he doesn't have a Twitter account, he created a temporary Twitter account.
Yeah.
Was that how this worked out?
Yeah, he created a temporary Twitter account that he then reportedly deleted directly after.
But then to go one step even further, he goes and hands this goofball piece of script over to our dear friend Dan Starkey,
Right.
to do a completely unnecessary and yet wonderful little preamble with a stuffed creature, a little plush doll thing.
Among other props.
Among other props, the giant tower of toilet paper and such. It was beautiful. Including a little off-camera piece from Neve McIntosh yelling for Strax to return. But what did they show? A plant? They put
They just
plant.
cut to a jade plant. It's so good.
But this starts setting a trend, right? So they do this, and the other showrunners say, well, wait a second. I can do this stuff too. I'm creative. I write good story. So Chibnall, being the man in the hot seat right now, says, okay, I don't have the capacity at the moment to get somebody to come out of the woodwork and do a little video segment for me, but here's a short story that explains one of the supposed continuity holes that you people are still yammering about. And that's how the Doctor possibly survived the fall from the TARDIS into the train at the top of The Woman Who Fell to Earth.
Ooh, I have not heard this yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was officially released by the BBC on the Doctor Who website today.
Okay.
And all I will say is, I dare you not to think of a potted petunia and a very confused whale.
Please tell me she says, "Oh no, not again."
I've said all I'm going to say. I've said all I'm going to say.
Oh, an ound sound.
Ground. I wonder if it'll be my friend.
Friend.
So, and then to sort of wrap up this entire showrunner giftapalooza, Russell T. Davies steps in and says, "Wait a second, I'm not done yet." Because given the success of the Day of the Doctor rewatch, I think the next plan was that everybody was going to jump in and we're all going to watch Rose on. I believe it's all going to happen on Thursday, the 26th.
Right, the anniversary.
Right. Mm-hmm. So if I can get this thing edited fast enough, it'll be today as you're listening to this, or hopefully shortly thereafter. Well, Russell said that he was going to add a prequel to this. I don't know if he's being clever. I don't know if he's being sort of cheeky, and he's going to do something kind of similar to what Moffat did. But I'd be just as happy to see some shot on my Android stepping out of a bush Christopher Eccleston goofy bit that he would do just to tack on to this, in similar vein to what Starkey did for us. That you can go ahead and feel free to entertain me for weeks with these sort of things, folks.
Oh, right, absolutely.
Just keep them coming.
I think we need to give credit where credit's due. That Emily Cook is very responsible for approaching the showrunners as well and getting them to kind of join in. Now, I don't know if they were planning on doing some stuff, but it certainly feels like she's been doing a lot of the legwork on this.
Excellent. So, that makes a lot of sense.
So if you're not following her on Twitter right now or social media, she's a good person because she's got a ton of little insights and is definitely letting people know what to expect.
Excellent. Well, let's hope this continues because it makes these weeks a lot more bearable. And we have a long while to go. Let's not fool anybody.
I'm Austin from PopXcast, a pop culture podcast part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other awesome geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Yeah, well, next week we're going to be coming back with our Torchwood rewatch with episode 10 of season 1, Combat.
Right. Of which I am in a very Haley and Jay boat. I don't remember a dang thing about this story.
Crap, I was really hoping that you were going to be able to summarize it. So I guess we'll all be surprised together.
That's right. Well, not to mention the fact, it has been months since we've done any Torchwood rewatch stuff. And we're still plodding through season 1.
True.
Which is a bit of a slog. Let's not fool ourselves.
Admittedly, yes, it can be.
The dough was still cooking. So.
All right. Well, this has been episode 374 of Gallifrey Public Radio. Until next week, this is Jay saying, please, for the love of God, stay home, stay safe.
And this is Keir saying, now no one knows where we're going. Not even Haley.
And this is Drew saying, well, thanks. Well, thanks for inviting. Well, thanks for inviting me. Well, thanks for inviting me on. Well, thanks for inviting me on the. Well, thanks for inviting me on the show.
We'll see you guys next week.
LLC.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Gallifrey Public Radio. Want to keep the conversation going? You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, or just send us a good old-fashioned email to feedback@gallifreypublicradio.com. You can also give us a phone call at 754-225-5477. That's 754-CALL-GPR, and you may hear your voice on a future episode of the show. Everything's got to end sometime, otherwise nothing would ever get started. Join us next week for a brand new episode.
Pension. Gallifrey Public Radio is copyright 2020. See you next week.